Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I'm your host, the Yellow Brick Rabbit, and today we look at part 3 of our Wonder Woman discussion. As I mentioned before, I liked this movie. I thought it was an okay movie. I think you should go watch this movie before you watch this because it's full of spoilers. All the spoilers. So without further ado, let's get on with it.
Nooit is er mijn alles afgemaakt. Ooit wordt ze die hele niet konden ontsnappen. Die gewoon de uitslaven meegenomen.
Waar is dat gebeurd?
Veld, aan die andere kant van die Louvre.
So Flemish, another language that Diana apparently knows. Now I didn't mention this one earlier with the group of the other language bits because this fits in better with what we're talking about at this point in the movie, so I threw it in here. But this character makes no sense. This lady and her child sitting on the front line of the British trench in World War I makes absolutely no sense. So let's start at the start of her story, where she's from Veld, the city that they liberate at the end of this bit of the movie, and she escaped and came here and is warning them that the Germans were taking villagers as slaves. Now later we see the town, and given its location and proximity to the front, it's amazing that it's still inhabited by civilians. It's amazing that everyone hasn't left unless they're kept there as by force in some way. So she's escaped and she's come across. Now in a moment Steve Trevor is going to tell Diana about what the front line is and what no man's land is, and how no one can get across no man's land. And yet, this girl is from Veld on the other side of no man's land. Somehow, she has managed, with her child, to get across no man's land, which is never explained. Now, on top of that, we find her in the front trench. What's she doing in the front trench? Like, as soon as she got there, like, some soldier would lead her back down through the, like, auxiliary trenches, back away from the front line, past the artillery line, and then, like, onward into civilian area. So many things don't add up about this lady with her child on the front line that it levels on the absurd. Now the next scene is an amazingly beautiful scene. It's filled with tension, and it's epic in proportion, and it's filmed beautifully. And it's all in all very, very good, and I like it very much, but there's some nitpicky issues with it. So why hasn't she been shot in the face yet?
Diana!
No, really, like, you can do like a tiara hit, or no, really, like, the first person up the ladder is basically dead. This is like a common knowledge thing of, like, the World War I, is that the first person up the ladder basically knew that they were dead. Like, the second that flesh pops up, it's over. We already knew this. This is why they went up in, like, giant waves and stuff, just to, in sheer numbers, overwhelm them. Why would anyone go up first? Well, because if you didn't go up, then your own people would shoot you. Yeah, it was a brutal, brutal war. Oh look, someone finally shot a bullet. Now, this scene annoys me just because it's kind of evident that one of the reasons they put this in World War I is so that it would be different from the Captain America movies and not be set in World War II. And for some reason they gave Diana this super shield that we know nothing about. We've never learned anything about this shield. We know she has the bracers that we've seen her use over and over again, but for some reason she has this wonder shield, and it almost seems like they want us to think of her as a copycat Captain America, which is terrible. Don't do that. Why does Wonder Woman have a shield? Have her use her bracers. It's almost like you're scared of the bracers. You're ashamed of the bracers. Nah, just use it. Also, I really like that scene because it's basically the only time in the movie where Diana even questions what to do, or where she's like slowed down in the slightest by something. The moment where Diana actually uses help that's available and is glad that it's there. I'm not going to go as far as to say she needs it, but
by ridding this world of you forever.
the person we just watched being impaled is Ludendorff. Ludendorff is a historical character, and I am not going to bother with all the technical terms and ranks. Instead, I'm going to keep it really simple and just say that basically Ludendorff and Hindenburg are the German army. They are the be-all and end-all of power in the German military, and yeah, they pretty much own the country. Now, even though it's kind of ridiculous to even start trying to look at this film historically, let's just look at how far off history we have diverged in this story here. Because I think they missed an opportunity for Hindenburg to be a recurring villain for Wonder Woman. Because not only is he known for helping a certain dictator to rise to power after this war in Germany, but he's also known as a figure who was into like all the occulty stuff and Germanic god worship and stuff like that. So I think he fits really well as a Wonder Woman villain to like bring back and have again, and at the same time he can't really go on to do what he historically did, which raises questions about World War II and the whole situation there. But I mean, you can always just say someone else did it because he was getting dead, but it's not a big thing. I'm not saying the whole movie is broken because, you know, this dude dies. It's good to see him die, especially the way that he's portrayed in the movie, so, like, whatever. But I do want to point out the inconsistencies with the history, just for its own sake. So let's look at how we diverged from history well before we got to the point where Ludendorff dies.
It is over, General. Germany is giving up. Von Hindenburg has recommended the Kaiser sign the armistice.
So the idea that the two most powerful men in the German military didn't sit down and talk about their decision to support the armistice agreement before publicly sharing this information is sort of ridiculous, especially since, I mean, their power was pretty much tied to each other. But this dilemma of a triangle of power is what the entire villain's dilemma hangs upon. Because it is this issue trying to convince the Kaiser to not sign the armistice as opposed to the recommendation of Hindenburg, supposedly, to go on with the armistice, that drives the time frame of the gas that needs to be developed so that he can convince the Kaiser that they can win the war.
Diana, the gas.
The village.
So their plan is to show the Kaiser a super gas that they've developed that they think can win the war so that they don't end it. The problem is Germany is on the brink of starvation. They don't have the facility to produce that gas in a quantity that would make a difference in the war in the long run at this point. And once he has it, to demonstrate its effectiveness to the Kaiser, they decide not to drop it on the front line somewhere where it can be a battlefield test and give them real world results that'll help in the war already. They decide to target a village that was until recently on their side of the battle line, a town where they had just taken a bunch of the population away as slaves, as is explained by the Flemish lady in the trench. That makes no sense. We even see soldiers filtering backwards all the way up to the front line of the trench. Why is she there? Why hasn't anyone taken them with it? Like, oh yeah, no, I'm going back with Charlie who lost his leg, so yeah, take the Flemish girl with you. Okay. Like, I'm sorry, I'm getting off topic. Let's back to this. So I wanted to get this through because it's the start of the Ludendorff thing and to explain the start of the villain's dilemma and how it doesn't really make any sense or difference.
It is over for all of you.
So I had to check the credits to be sure after the scene, because I only noticed it on rewatching it, but I thought, no, they couldn't have. That can't be. They didn't. But they did. You can check the credits, and yeah, no, this is Hindenburg. He just killed Hindenburg. The guy who became president of Germany after the war. I don't think he wasn't the first one, but like, he's still like, what? And a little more cynical and possibly a little too harsh of a critique here is, you just killed Hindenburg with a flammable gas. When I realized this was Hindenburg, I just, like, the symbolism kind of hit me, and I got that image of them, burning the gas at the end of their test with the gas mask, and yeah, let's be glad they didn't light the gas in this scene, because that would be a very terrible reference, like, totally direct. But yeah, no, they took down the Hindenburg with flammable gas. That's, and it's a bit of a stretch that there's that analogy. I don't think they probably didn't do that deliberately, but it is kinda there, and could be seen as a bit of bad taste, and I don't think it was deliberate, so. Onward to some real mistakes instead of just historical rewriting.
It's Veld, V-E-L-D. It's a tiny village. It may not even be on the map.
Oh, I found it! I found it!
Did you find Ludendorff's operation?
No, but I located him. And oh, lucky you, he's only a few miles away at German High Command.
German High Command, huh?
So first we're going to ignore that until she found Felt, she was guiding her finger along the wrong side of the front. We're going to ignore that, but we are going to mention for a second that Steve said in the beginning of the movie that it had been 4 years, that the war had gone on for 4 years, and so it's 1918, right? It is 1918, right? They're all talking about the armistice. Both sides are discussing the armistice and on the brink of signing it. So it's after the 100-day offensive, right? So again, it's after the 100-day offensive, right? So the line should be not anywhere near there anymore, right? So we're going to ignore that bit too. We're just going to ignore that and place the line right back here, because you may be saying like, no, like maybe it's right before or something like that, or maybe I'm off by like, you know, my days or whatever. So once again, doesn't it snow in Felt when they're having the party that they were liberated? Yeah, okay. So here's another one. We have August and November, and so that would be towards the end of the 100-day offensive, going into October and November when it would be snowing. And that made me pause and think about the movie in its totality and the weather that we're presented with, and how it doesn't really confirm anything about what time of year it is, when it should be winter or autumn, basically the end of autumn and start of winter, but then they're in the wrong place for history. So we're going to leave that to the side as well for a second, and we're just going to accept this line, right? We're going to accept that they're still over here and they haven't pushed forward, and, you know, the war isn't falling, because otherwise we're in the completely wrong part of the world. Because where have they placed Veld? Because I don't think Veld actually belongs here, but we have 3 reference markers on the map so we can find it here. We have Hazebrouck, Morbik, and Steenbeek. Veld is right there. Okay, let's look at the map for a second. Ignore the line, we'll get to that in a moment. We have Hazebrook, we have Moerbeek, we have Stembeek. And so somewhere here would be Veld, right? Possibly this field right here, which would maybe be why it's called field. So it would probably be somewhere here-ish. Do you see anything wrong with that placement? Yeah, even like the line going back to August of 1918 doesn't have Hazebrook behind the line. So did we skip 6 months or what? Like, what happened? Because it starts snowing when they're in Veld. Which, I mean, it could be here, but, yeah, anyway. But that's not actually where Veld is, and we'll get to that in a moment. But first, let's look at where they put German High Command. Now, German High Command is not here, and you may notice that I didn't choose the same thing. They call it Chateau Veronique, or there's a card that references that somewhat, like, distorted, but or not distorted, but covered up. I can't find any such place, but there is a place nearby that would possibly be what they're referencing it off of. Because the only thing I can find is a wine. So unless German High Command was in a bottle of wine, which may be a drunk joke, but other than that, I don't really get the point of it. So I chose Chateau Niep, because it is known for being used and converted by various militaries from World War I and II, and even before that, I think in like Napoleonic times and stuff like that. So it's the type of place that they're referencing, at least in the thing, and it's close enough. It's kind of close enough. And you may notice I have the walking distances there, and you're like, she didn't walk, she was on a horse. I'm like, don't worry, I'm not gonna complain about this one. They chose where to put these places, and I also went to Hazebrook, not to the field. So, but it's a mute point. She can do it. It's like, as you can see, it's like 22, 23 kilometers, and on the horse, that probably won't even take her half an hour. So it makes sense that she can go from here to here. That's kind of also another reason that I chose this one, but I had to do that because this one doesn't really exist, and this one doesn't really exist there. So let's go look at where they do exist, and that's why I started with this one, is because I can find the other ones based off of it, basically, geographically. But first we need to look at this map for a second to get our bearings, using this front line to give them the most benefit of the doubt, or, well, this one, we'll even use this one as the front line, you know, to give them the benefit of the doubt of what we can, but it doesn't really matter. What I want to note is Newport. We have Newport, which is on the line, and we have Ypres, which is on the line, and yeah, Hazebrook is over there, but we've already dealt with that. So Ypres and Newport specifically, and Bruges is all the way over here, right? Newport, Ypres, Bruges. Okay, now back on our Google map, we see we have Newport, we have Ypres, which is the Flemish for Ypres, and we have Bruges. And here would be the line, right? Somewhere along here, right? In here. Bruges a bit back. And here we have Veld. Now, I've already pinned it, and it was just easier to do it this way, so that was kind of pointless. But just to show you, we're in the same area. That's the line. And here is a place that is actually called Veld. That is right past the line of World War I. Now, we're still talking about the wrong line for 1918, or at least late 1918, but, so my first question is, why did they move Veld? Why didn't they just choose a town that was actually near where they wanted to place it geographically? Because if we look, here's Ypres, and here's Hazebrook. So they placed it down here, somewhere. That field is where I guess we decided it would probably most logically be, somewhere. From up here, at least that's the place that we know. Now, maybe historically there was, maybe this was known as Veld, but locally or something, which would make sense because it's a field, but Don't really have much more than that to go on. So what is this line we're looking at here? Well, the other side of it was called German High Command, which was supposedly in this chateau, but, well, we've gone over that. Where the real German High Command was, is down here. And I've got a... So here we see a simplistic rendering of some forces in World War I, and as you see, the general headquarters in 1918-ish time was around here. So where is that? I just show you. It's over here. Yeah. Yeah, that's a long way to go. I think I figured out why they changed where it was. But then why not just not call it German High Command? Because it doesn't need to be at German High Command. It doesn't make sense that you're doing a weapons test at German High Command really that much, I don't think. And then just choose one of the cities that was actually on the map here. Like, and it's one of these problems that we get once again because they've tried to over-explain. They talk about how Diana speaks 100 languages and knows English, and then don't explain anything about it. They just declare it. And they use historical characters and kill them, and then they aren't in part of the rest of the history, and there's no mention of what happens with that. And they use historical towns, like Veld, and then place them somewhere else that doesn't make sense in the timeline, wherever it is. And because they bring up all of these things, we end up with all of these questions that are giant cracks in the fourth wall. And they're just throwing them at you for some reason. It's like they want to say, nothing in our movie makes sense, and we are going to point it all out to you. And then they wonder why people like me come along and then inspect every minute detail that they can. And I've said it before, I'll say it again, like, I could be wrong on any and all of my criticisms whatsoever, and I'd love to be wrong. I want to love this movie more than I do, and like I said before, it's still a good movie. It's an enjoyable film. You don't have to have all of these things make sense for it to be a good film, a good story, a good experience. But it also doesn't hurt to discuss it, to bring it up, to try and improve things, and so that's why we do this. So to get to the chase, this is like 218 kilometers between the places that are historically referenced but not on that map. Why did they show that map? Why? They just didn't need to show the map. But, and this is, well, I mean, yeah, 4 hours, 5 hours, let's say like 4.5 hours by horse galloping the whole way. Wonder Horse. So saying as none of this matters because we got the front line wrong, or at least the date wrong, or we can't figure out what date it is. Just for the fun of it, let's check out where this line is in comparison to the Velds and such. Alright, yeah, this is Gent over here, so it's like, you know, gone that way. This is the important part for us, though, because, like, you know, here's Veld, here's the imaginary Veld off of YBR, Hazebroek. We've got... Where'd you go, Gent? Oh, there, okay. Hazebroek, Gent, Veld, like, that... This is actually where the line should be going these days, but yes, I know I'm nitpicking, and I could be wrong. I'm not a World War I expert, and maybe one could point out how I'm wrong. I love to be wrong, like I said before, so, you know, if you have a way to say, like, you know, dude, this is actually makes sense because of this, you know, throw it in there. But that's all we have time for in this installment. I've been the Yellow Brick Rabbit, and I hope you have enjoyed us looking at Wonder Woman. Join us next time for the fourth and final installment of our nitpick of Wonder Woman. If you haven't already, please follow the Yellow Brick Rabbit. Press all the little button thingies. Do all the other things you do for all the other YouTubers, please. Thank you. Thank you in advance. And I hope to catch you next time we go down the rabbit hole.